A friendship that lasted 50 years, a betrayal that ended in blood, and a film so ambitious that the studio tore it apart before audiences could see it. In 1984, Sergio Leone delivered his final masterpiece, and Hollywood destroyed it. This is Once Upon a Time in America. Released in 1984 and directed by Sergio Leone, this crime epic follows Jewish gangsters across 5 decades, from their brutal childhood in the 1920s to their broken lives in the 1960s. Robert De Niro stars as Noodles, a man drowning in guilt. James Woods plays Max, his closest friend turned betrayer. But the version shown in American theaters wasn't what Leone created. The studio gutted over 2 hours and restructured the entire film. What you're about to discover explains why this masterpiece nearly vanished forever. The first fact we're looking at reveals just how long Leone waited for this moment. In 1968, he discovered a book called The Hoods, written by Harry Gray, a real gangster documenting his life in New York's criminal underworld. Leone read it and became obsessed. This was the story he had to tell. But getting the film made became a war. Securing rights dragged on for years. Studios rejected it repeatedly. They said the story was too long, too dark, too depressing for audiences. Leone refused to compromise. He turned down other projects and waited. For nearly 20 years, he fought because he knew this would be his final American film, his last chance to explore friendship, memory, and violence. When production began in 1982, Leone had been carrying the story for half his life. The next thing you need to know is the physical toll this production took on its lead actor. Playing Noodles across 5 decades meant Robert De Niro had to age convincingly from a young man to someone in his 60s. For the older scenes, he sat in the makeup chair for 5 hours every single morning. Prosthetics built wrinkles around his eyes. Age spots were painted onto his hands and face. Every detail had to be perfect. But De Niro went deeper than makeup. He moved differently, slower, more cautious. His voice carried decades of exhaustion. His eyes reflected guilt accumulated over a lifetime. Leone watched this transformation daily and said it was like witnessing time physically age a human being before his eyes. Now here's where things get really interesting. When Leone finished editing, his cut of Once Upon a Time in America ran 269 minutes, 4 hours. In May 1984, he premiered it at the Cannes Film Festival. After those 269 minutes, the audience rose to their feet and applauded for 15 straight minutes. Critics declared it Leone's masterpiece, a film that captured how memory actually functions, jumping unpredictably between the past and present. Then American studio executives watched the same film. They panicked. 4.5 hours? No intermission? A non-linear structure? They said it needed to be fixed. What happened next nearly killed the film forever. What comes next is absolutely infuriating. The US theatrical release ran only 139 minutes. The studio had slashed 130 minutes, over 2 full hours of footage. But they didn't just shorten it. They completely restructured the film. Leone had built it like memory, fragmented, emotional, jumping through time. The studio rearranged everything chronologically, beginning, middle, end, simple and linear. They destroyed the film's rhythm, its meaning, its soul. Critics who had praised the Cannes version now wrote confused, negative reviews. Audiences stayed away. The box office collapsed. Leone had spent 20 years fighting to make this film. The studio destroyed it in weeks. He was devastated and never directed another movie. Let's shift gears and talk about the incredible commitment from one of the actors. When James Woods read Leone's screenplay, he immediately called his agent and said he would do anything to be in this film. By 1983, Woods was an established actor who could negotiate substantial paychecks. Instead, he agreed to work for scale, the absolute minimum pay allowed by union rules. Why? He said it was the best script he had ever read. Max was unlike any character he'd encountered. Charming, ambitious, dangerous, and ultimately self-destructive. Woods studied real gangsters from that era to make his performance authentic. The result is one of the most ferocious performances in crime cinema. A man whose ambition devours everything, including his oldest friendship. Another fascinating detail is how the film's haunting score came to be. Unlike most composers who write music after watching the finished film, Ennio Morricone created the entire score before production even started. Then, during filming, Leone did something unusual. He played Morricone's music on set while the actors performed their scenes. The haunting pan flute melody, the one that sounds like childhood dissolving, played as De Niro and Woods acted. The actors could hear the music, feel its emotion, and let it guide their performances in real time. The result is a score that doesn't just accompany the film, it lives inside every frame. Morricone later said that this was the most emotionally intense work he'd ever created. Now we come to perhaps the most controversial aspect of the entire film. There's a scene where Noodles violently assaults Deborah in the back of a limousine. It's brutal and difficult to watch. When the film was released, critics and audiences demanded the scene to be removed. Some called for the entire movie to be banned. Leone refused to cut it. He said this moment was essential to understanding Noodles as a character, a man who destroys everything he loves because he can't control his desperation and rage. That violence explains why Noodles spends the next 50 years consumed by guilt. Remove that scene and he becomes just another charming gangster instead of someone genuinely broken by his own actions. Leone never apologized for including it. He believed confronting that darkness was necessary to understand the character's lifetime of regret. Here's something that might surprise you about where the film was actually shot. By the 1980s, authentic 1920s New York architecture had mostly been demolished or modernized. Leone needed locations that no longer existed in New York, so his production team went to Montreal, where buildings from that era were better preserved. The Brooklyn Bridge scenes were filmed in New York, but most of the street sequences showing the young gang were shot in Montreal's historic districts. The Venice sequences near the end were filmed in Italy, creating a dreamlike European atmosphere that contrasts sharply with the harsh New York memories. Leone obsessed over every location. Each setting had to feel like it was slipping into the past, like a photograph slowly fading. Moving forward, let's discuss what might be the most debated aspect of the entire film. The ending shows elderly Noodles confronting Max. Or does it? Is Max really alive and successful? Or is Noodles hallucinating the entire reunion? Then we see the final shot, Noodles in 1933, lying in an opium den, smiling. Is the entire film just his drug-induced dream? Which parts actually happened, and which parts are fantasy? Leone was asked about the ending hundreds of times throughout his life. He never gave a definitive answer. He told interviewers that audiences needed to decide for themselves what was real and what was memory. He believed life works this way. We never truly know which memories are accurate and which ones we've constructed to cope with our guilt. 40 years later, film scholars still argue about the ending. No consensus exists, and that's exactly what Leone intended. But here's where something remarkable happened 3 decades after the film's release. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, film students discovered Once Upon a Time in America. Critics started reconsidering their initial reviews. Bootleg copies of the longer European version circulated among cinephiles who recognized that something extraordinary had been destroyed. In 2012, a major restoration project released a 251-minute director's cut, much closer to Leone's original vision. Audiences who had only seen the butchered 139-minute version finally experienced the film's intended structure and emotional rhythm. They understood why critics at Cannes had responded so powerfully 30 years earlier. The film that Hollywood killed was brought back to life. Today, it's consistently ranked among the greatest films ever made. Wait until you hear about Leone's obsession with authenticity, even for the smallest details. In a scene where the young gang steals watches from drunk men, a vintage garbage truck appears briefly in the background. Leone's production team tracked down 2 actual garbage trucks from the 1930s and completely restored them for filming. That truck appears on screen for less than a minute. Why restore antique vehicles for such limited screen time? Leone believed that every single element had to be authentic. One false detail would shatter the illusion of memory he was constructing. He treated filmmaking like archaeological reconstruction, bringing the past back to life with absolute precision, no matter the cost or effort. And finally, we come to the most heartbreaking part of this story. After Once Upon a Time in America, Sergio Leone tried developing new projects. He talked about adapting the Siege of Leningrad. He explored other historical epics, but nothing came together. The brutal destruction of his final film had devastated him emotionally. On April 30th, 1989, Sergio Leone suffered a heart attack and died. He was 60 years old. He never saw the 2012 restoration, never witnessed the critical reevaluation, never knew that his masterpiece would eventually be recognized as one of cinema's towering achievements. But his vision outlived him. Once Upon a Time in America now stands as a testament to a filmmaker who refused to compromise his artistic vision, even when that refusal destroyed him. Once Upon a Time in America is a meditation on friendship, betrayal, and how memory distorts our understanding of the past. The film itself was betrayed, cut apart, dismissed, left for dead, but it survived. Audiences refused to let it disappear. 40 years later, it proves that genuine artistry cannot be permanently buried. Which of these facts hit you hardest? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you want more untold stories from cinema's hidden history, hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching.